First from Proverbs. Fear of God is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. Wisdom will multiply your days and add years to your life. If you become wise, you will be the one to benefit. If you scorn wisdom, you will be the one to suffer. Now from the Hindu Holy Scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. One whose mind is not troubled in sorrow, who does not hanker after pleasures and is free from attachment, fear, and hatred, is called the sage of steady wisdom. Finally, from 1 John, chapter 4, God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God in them. Love will come to perfection in us when we can face the day of judgment without fear, because our relation to this world is just like Christ's. There's no fear in love, for perfect love drives out fear. To fear is to expect punishment, and anyone who is afraid is still imperfect in love. We love because God first loved us. If you say you love God but hate your sister or brother, you are a liar. For you cannot love God whom you have not seen, if you hate your neighbor whom you have seen. If we love God, we should love our sisters and brothers as well. We have this commandment from God. Ancient words from Scripture for present-day consideration.
I'm so grateful that y'all have been willing to sit through this sermon series. This is at least the last one before my writing leave. What I've been trying to do is kind of walk through some of my meanderings and wonderings about how does religion need to change to be a gift to the future? And we've gone a long way. In some ways, this is the very heart of the project. Moving from fear of God to courage to love, I think is very important. I was raised in first a Methodist and then a Presbyterian, sort of middle of the road, very acculturated view of things. We didn't believe in hell, but we still believe we were being saved from hell somehow. Work out. It was sort of the plight of progressive Christianity. It's like you're trying to eat a filleted fish, and the skeleton is kind of important to make sense of things. But today I'd like us to think about what it means to say fear is the beginning of wisdom, because that sure doesn't sound very welcoming. It sounds kind of like somebody's trying to make us afraid. And in my life, fear has not always led to wisdom. Usually when people are afraid or traumatized or hurt or depressed, we're just trying to cope. And when we do, some of the meanest things we can possibly do at those times, not because we're bad, but because pain isn't always a very good guide. In fact, Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, wrote that he believed that religion is born of fear. And as I've said before, when I first got to college trying to make sense of what I've been taught, run across this philosopher that says that really it's just we're afraid. We're afraid of what happens after we die. We're afraid of the guilt, afraid of being judged and punished. And that made some sense to me because my grandparents owned a funeral home in Burke-Burnett, Texas. And so part of the reason I wound up so strange, in terms of humor anyway, is sitting there and seeing this incredible dissonance between what the adults were saying and what they were doing. I mean, dressing up a body and putting makeup on and all this kind of stuff and say they look like they're asleep. They would cry and then say how happy they were that somebody was with Jesus. And as a little kid, I was going, okay, this is freaky. This is weird. And it wasn't the first time, but you realize the adults are trying to cope with something. And when my grandfather died, he was the mortician, and they did the funeral for the mortician, which is kind of strange. But that would hit me very different, because they were crying and saying he's with Jesus, and they'd say he looks so natural. He looks like he's asleep. Jimmy, would you like to see it? And here you go. And holy bejeebers. He didn't look natural. He didn't look like he was sleeping. He looked like a wax candle. With an ill-fitting suit, his hands looked like kind of karate type things, and that strange smile, I've heard it called fish lips, where the jowls just kind of settle back, that really disturbing look. And so I can understand the idea that religion was just invented out of fear, to frighten people, to scare them, to get control of them. But to me, it doesn't make sense to say that fear didn't exist before religion showed up, or domination, or superstition. They may not have been calling it that, but remember, we come from monkey folk, right? We have evolved, and we carry a lot of that evolution within us. And it is not religion's fault that life is so scary. In fact, when you look at the Bible, a lot of it is trying to relieve the fear. I've heard that there's 365 times when angels say, "Fear not." I was told that by a preacher, so I don't know if it's true or not. You always have to look these things up. But our text today basically said, if you're afraid of being judged, if you're afraid of hell, then your love is incomplete. We didn't say that literally in words. That's not somebody trying to scare you. It's trying to help you out of your fear. Some of the great heroes and sheroes that I had as a kid of the faith, not all of them were Christian. There was Gandhi, Martin Luther King. Malcolm X wasn't a hero at the time, but he got to be a hero. But those are all people whose religion led them into the fire, led them to face their fear. Every one of them was assassinated for their faith in many ways. So I understand it, I get it, and I'm all there when it comes to critiquing religion. But when we come to the heart of things, we're all asking questions about life, our place in life. What can we trust? To me, that's what faith is. What can we trust in life? What is the foundation for our living? One of the ways that I've seen progressive religion deal with this concept of fear of God as the beginning of wisdom is to translate it as reverence. And I get that, but when I read the ancient scriptures, I'm hearing something a lot deeper and more profound than that. And what I want to suggest is when you are afraid, when you're terrified, the theological parts of the places you can't get to a lot of the times. That what's real for you is your fear. That's all you know sometimes, is that you're lonely or you're terrified, or that things aren't working, or you're ashamed. That is the reality. And one way to understand our passage today is say that can be the first step toward wisdom. That your fear, your loneliness, your pain, it's not saying it was sent to you to teach you something. It's not saying that at all. But it's saying there's something there that can help you love more, grow more, become wiser. We don't have time to completely unpack this today because it's too personal. But for a second, think about what are the things that human beings are afraid of. Let's just put a real quick list together. Death, that usually tops the list. Illness, pain. Failure, public speaking, shame, loss, loneliness. Somebody said something and I missed it. Love. Yeah, we can be afraid of positive things too. Violence. Uncertainty. So those are all, I mean, we could spend all day with that list. But those are realities in life. And if religion shuts that down, if religion asks you to feel to not feel what you feel, it's asking you to deny the one reality that's there for you. Now let's think about what fear feels like in the body. What is it? Where do you feel fear in your body? Gut? What? Tense. You're tense, yes. I thought you said tent in the tent. Well, I guess you could. It's tense, yeah. Where else do you feel fear? Gut? Something? Heart, chest. It can hurt your chest, your breath, your throat can constrict. You feel your pulse start sweating.
Mind that won't turn off.
Yeah, the mind that won't turn off, it just keeps chasing itself, crying. And the question that we're not going to not have time to get into, but to think about this week is, what does fear do to your perception? Because I think that's what the wisdom teachings are trying to help us deal with. When we realize that our emotions all change how we perceive things. And when you're afraid, you're going to see the world a certain way. One of the most terrifying moments of my life, my sister was having a seizure and her face changed. And so I understood when Alfred Hitchcock would take monuments and things and have something chaotic happen there. You can feel like the whole of reality is unraveling for you. So the more we get to know fear, the more we understand it. As long as we're running from fear, we don't understand it. One of the things that was really informative to me as a kid is I'd love to go to these horror movies. And then to have magazines that showed what the monster was, and you're sitting there, it looks stupid every time. When you look at it, it's comical, but when you're running from it, it's this incredible monster. So when Jesus said to build your life on a foundation of stone, not sand, I think that's the invitation to be who you really are, to feel what you really feel, and explore that. And the way out of the trap is to go deeper in who you really are. That's the foundation that you can count on. People that teach you to believe something or feel something are not doing you a favor. What the wisdom teachings are saying is whatever it is that you're feeling, go deeper into that. So that's sort of the first stop, that fear is the starting place towards wisdom, for true wisdom. When we pretend that the world is different, when we pretend like we're not afraid, it's really hard to go into this depth. I was taught that God is like this really friendly, sort of a Captain Kangaroo, was one of my heroes at the time. Most of you aren't maybe old enough to know Captain Kangaroo. It'd be like Mr. Rogers, which is fine until you get certain diagnoses, right? It's fine until your marriage doesn't work. It's fine until your kids are going through trouble and you just can't sleep because you have no idea if they're going to do something self-destructive or not. So to realize that God is not this kind of friendly being that protects you, that's a great place to start, but it's kind of like a pacifier. You know what I'm saying? It calms you down, but it doesn't give you milk. It doesn't nurture you, really. One of the ways to understand the symbol God is like a magnifying glass. Because what you're looking for is everywhere, right? So you're not going to find that with your ordinary way of looking at things. To experience something that's everywhere, you have to get very quiet, very still. And then you feel it as a kind of a quality behind everything. There are things in life that you should be afraid of, right? Tiger, lions, tigers, bears. I recommend fear. I recommend running. But there are also things that start off triggering fear that we cannot run from. And that's very strange. Fear of death is very strange because there's no place to run. To be afraid of God, I think, means to put your fear under magnifying glass and make it include everything. Let your fear be your touchstone to the whole circle of life. The more beings that you can love and care about, even if it's concern for them, even if it's feeling their pain, the bigger your own life is, the bigger your own context is. One of the most fortunate things that happened to me as a child was there was a field behind our house, and I'd come home from the funeral home at the end of the summer, and I had these images of people made up and dressed up and all this kind of stuff. It's really weird when you're a kid because you're looking at a very strange angle at those kinds of things. Then I go out in this field and I'd see death as it is. It just is. And you realize life and death are not two separate things. There's one sort of orchestra that's taking place. And what I realized, what terrified me, were all the ways humans try to deny death. Think about your images of fear, like zombies, gravestones. All of that stuff is human beings trying to pretend like it's not happening. Actual death is inseparable from life. And it's still sad, it still hurts. But it's like John is saying, that kind of love, that larger love, the common life, casts out the fear. You still feel it, but it begins to dissolve in a larger context. When I really look at everything and realize, I'm on the same menu everybody else is, and there's nothing I can do to stop that. And I start realizing that's really what gave me life in the first place, so it can't be that bad. When I die, I go back to whatever it was that gave me life in the first place. Right? My grave and my cradle are two angles on the same kind of process in life. Well, the last image, in addition to, what was the first one? That fear can be the first step towards this. The second is that the symbol God, or the symbols of religion, can be a magnifying glass to put us in touch with the whole circle of life. And I saw that before I saw Lion King, but you get the point. You just listen to the circle of life sometimes when you're feeling afraid. And then finally, an image from Hinduism that I also see in John's passage, but I don't think it's clear in Christianity. But the idea that fear and desire are two sides of one coin. There's an image in yoga where the mind is seen as a calm lake. And there are two winds that disturb that calm lake: the wind of fear and the wind of desire. And you can't really separate the two. When you desire something, you fear losing it. So to realize that what we're looking for is the balance between fear and desire. That there's a peaceful place that we can live, an eye in the storm that we can live in. And again, we don't have time to unpack this totally, but think about what desire does to your perception. I've never had a writing leave where I didn't waste the first week thinking, okay, I've got to have a different set of computer tools. I've got to have that. I got to have it now, right? I can't do any of this stuff if I don't have X, right? And then I need like a mechanical pencil. These wooden pencils are stifling me. I've got to, and I'll just do that for a week. So think about what desire does. You can be absolutely happy and then you want something By the end of the day, you're miserable. And there are things you need, of course. But to realize that happiness is balance. It's not attainment. It's not accomplishment. It's settling into who you are in the larger circle of things. The philosopher Schopenhauer was always fascinated me. He said that human beings, we alternate between terror and boredom. See, when we have what we desire, it's boring. When we don't have it, we're terrified. But I think we want that. Why is it that we go to see horror movies? At least those of us that do. Why do kids love Halloween? That playing with all of those strange images of what the adults, fantasize about death. Even infants. When you play peekaboo, think about how strange that is. That even before somebody has learned anything, they're fascinated by that face. But if it gets too fast, it's terrifying. If it gets too close, it's terrifying. If it gets too far back, it's boring. There's a dance there. And that dance, that balance, is where our missing happiness, our missing peace, our missing courage often resides. A lot of people say that this teaching about fear is the beginning of wisdom. I don't think you can reconcile that with what John is saying. I think it goes deeper than that. It's deeper than reverence. It's realizing that fear is your primordial life force. So is desire. They're not evil, they're not bad, but they have to be balanced. So the real foundation for your life, you're not going to hear it from a preacher, right? You're going to find it in your own life. Sometimes in the places you most want to run away from. And if you can go into your fear, your sadness, your grief, there's wisdom there. There's light, there's sustenance. Something that feeds you, something that quenches your thirst for life. If you can't find it, then the symbols of religion magnify the process so that you can find your larger context. And to realize that there are things in life that you can't run away from and things in life you can't hold on to. And that's the way of life. Once we say yes to that, there's a magnificent peace that's possible. We can't feel it all of the time. Sometimes we get overwhelmed, all of us. If we could remember that we're on our way home, that the worst thing that happens is we get back home again, then we can find that eye of the storm all through our lives, our place in that circle of life. Well, those are my meanderings over that concept. We'll take a minute now for you to think about how you understand this idea of fear and wisdom.